welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Layla, the Lenormand reader, and today, folks, we are doing another Q&A video. So like I did the first time, I prompted you to send me your questions on the YouTube community page. I posted a prompt for you to give me your questions, and I have a few of them here. But I've also received a few of them by email, and I have also a few of them in other videos. So I want to take those up in this video because I think it makes sense for more of you to hear some of these questions. So thanks again for chiming in with your questions, and let's get right into them. Okay, so the first question I have is from Suleiman Flores. So Suleiman says, me again. Oh, there must be another question somewhere. Oh, and folks, I'm sorry about the noise. I am currently in Cairo, and Cairo is such a busy city. And I live in a pretty busy area, so it's exciting, but it's a bit noisy. So I'm sorry about that. Please bear with me. So Suleiman, it looks like he asked another question somewhere. We're going to get to it. He says, I would like to know how knighting works in a reading when reading a grand tableau. So knighting is a technique where you pair together cards that are away from each other in an L-shaped format. So knighting comes from chess, obviously, where you have the knight piece moves in an L shape, right? So the knight can only go up 2 and then 1 to the right or left, or down 2 to the right or left. It can also go sideways 2, and it can also go 1 and then 2. It just doesn't matter in this sense, but the idea is that it's an L-shaped move, one piece, 1 step and 2 steps. And so the same happens with a Lenormand tableau, where you have enough cards that you can do this. And so you would go down 2 cards and then to the right or left 1 card, or you would go up 2 cards and then to the right or left 1 card, or you would just go sideways as well. And you can also do just 1 card and then 2 up or 2 down, or right and left. So the idea is that it's an L-shaped as well that applies in a tableau. So that's how you would do a knighting technique in a tableau, Suleiman. You can also do it in a portrait because you have enough cards in a 9-card portrait. And knights offer a bit of detail. So they're not the key storylines like the rows and columns or the bigger diagonals. They offer details. So when you're in doubt about what a card is doing or what a card means, you might want to try knighting it to see what more information you get about the card. So for example, suppose you're looking at the book, and the diagonals and the lines and rows and columns that you're looking at the book, that you're looking at for the book, they're not really telling you what this book is about. It might be something else that's coming out, like who's doing what with the book. So you might try to knight the book and see if you get clues about what's in the book. You might do something like that as well for the letter or for the bird. With communication cards, it's kind of fun because you sort of get clues about, well, what is in there? What is in that letter? What does the bird want to tell us? You can also get clues about a person. And of course it applies to, I'm just giving you a few examples. I mean, the examples are endless. But let's say you have a person card, like a dog or a man or woman, and you're not sure about some characteristics about this person because the rows and columns are just telling you the storylines, like what's going on with them. But what if you want to know more about what they're like, for example? Then the detail might come through the knights. Of course, this is just a creative idea. It's going to come down to your specific tableau. So experiment with it, as it's really fun because you start digging out all of these interesting details about the cards. So that's how you would use the knighting, Suleiman. I hope this is helpful. Let's move on to the next one. Optimistic and happy. How do you know if the man or woman are always the same person or someone different in a portrait? Depending on the lines, it can be positive, but when you look at another line, it can be negative. Sometimes you say it's the same person, but other times you say it could be a different person. Yes, optimistic and happy, and admittedly, this can be tricky. So I would say that in a smaller spread, like a portrait, it's usually the same person. And so when there are negative and positive lines within that carry that person, it can mean that there are positive and negative events happening with them or for them. It can be that simple. But if you feel that it's really not that simple, that the energies of the lines are so different, then they might represent different people, even in a portrait. In a grand tableau where you have lots of cards, it's probably someone different, because there's so many lines that a card is going to be part of, that in all probability there's going to be different people that you're dealing with. Now, if you're focusing on just one person on a reading, if you're asking about one specific person, then in all probability, the man or woman represents just that person in the reading, even in a tableau. So that depends on the question. And yes, it's a bit tricky and it's going to come down to the reading, but in general, they're different people. They can be different people. And in general, it's not so tricky. And it's also pretty common, it happens often, that there are challenges and positive things happening with the same person. So I hope you're satisfied with this answer, optimistic and happy. Let me know. Okay, Clovis Pullins says, some of my family now know that I've been reading both tarot and Lenormand cards, and now to some, I'm an outcast. Welcome to the club. Have you dealt with this? I just found out that many years ago, this person's mother received a reading from a reader for telling a tragic incident that actually came to pass, and ever since she wanted nothing to do with divination. Well, so about this specific reading, it's pretty amazing to be able to forecast such an incident. Yes, it can scare people off, and so as a reader, you're going to make a decision about what kind of areas you're going to talk about, without basically not telling your client the truth. This can be a bit tricky, and it's a bit of a separate topic, but to go back to Clovis's first point, that now people know that she reads tarot and Lenormand and she's an outcast. Yes, and this comes up on my calls with my students. It's come up in other ways as a teacher of Lenormand, where people tell me, well, what do you do about it? So obviously I've been through this. I think we've all been through this. Anyone who reads tarot, Lenormand, deals in these areas, tends to come across these issues in their lives. So it's unlikely that most of us live in a place where this is completely normal and, there are no issues around it. So what do you do about it? Well, share it with people who care and don't share it with people who don't care. But to say that you're going to change your life to please certain people, I don't advise that. I mean, yes, it's not easy to say, I don't care about anyone and I'm just going to do my thing. It's not so obvious. Obviously, this is very much a work in personal development where you grow into your career or your calling, and you're going to compromise certain things, and you're going to accept that some people are not going to like it. You're going to accept that and move on and commit yourself to your work. So I would say this applies not only to reading cards and tarot and doing all of these things, but it can apply really to anything where or any career. I mean, if there's a certain career that doesn't fit with your background or the people in your environment, and you're going to sort of break off and do your thing, yes, you are going to be a bit of an outcast. I think in time, people come around to accept it, but I do also think that you don't need to make a point about it to the people who don't care about it. And I've personally been challenged about this, and I see where people are coming from, but it's a bit like anything else. So suppose you practice yoga, or you're vegan like me. Well, a lot of people in my environment don't care about either yoga or veganism. And I don't have to sit down and talk to them about it, sit down and convince them about it all day long. They do their thing and I do my thing. As long as, they're not imposing on me how to eat or how to practice, and these things, then, I don't have to complicate my life more than it is, challenging. So I appreciate it when people challenge me on this. But at the same time, why do you want to rub in other people's faces what they don't care about? They're free and you're free. So that's what I would do about it, Clovis. I just want to add that one area where this can be a bit sensitive is in religion. So with religious environments, these things like reading cards and horoscope, all of that stuff, all of divination, all of magic, all of non-religious spirituality is often met with a lot of challenge. I think the same thing applies, and yes, it's unfortunate for those of us who are both religious and practice these things at the same time. And there's actually a few people like that. They are religious, they go to church, they go to mosques, they practice their religion, but they also are really attracted to this kind of work. So it can be pretty challenging for them. If you have the option, shuffle your life around to find a community that is supportive across your different interests. It's not going to be easy depending on where you live. And then again, I would say one way to adapt is to just keep some things to yourself and, not share them to the people who don't care about it. It's not that you're hiding it or you're not, you're not being honest about it. But, some people don't care about some things, like yoga and veganism or whatever else you do, like programming, for example. People are not interested in it, so you don't have to, spend time telling people about it when they don't care. Just with people who are like that, focus on what you have in common with them. Some people are going to like some aspects of your life and others not. So I hope this helps, Clovis, and I hope you're able to pursue your work in a way that is constructive to you. Yes, it's tricky, but it's manageable. I think so. Okay. So enough on that topic. That's a big one. That's a big topic. Jen asks, I'm curious about your deck. Is it your own deck? And is it available for purchase? I like the simplistic style. Thank you, Jen. I love the simplistic style. I'm a minimalist in my life. And I think Jen is referring to my deck. So this is the Purple Silhouettes deck. It's been ages, admittedly. I'm sorry that I've been trying to make this available to several people who've been asking about it. I think I might have found someone. It's going to be someone who's a bit different from the people who printed this, but I've ordered decks from them before, and I'm happy with the quality. And the reason I went for those other guys, or I'm still working on it, let's hope it works, is that it's print on demand, which means that they print it if you want to order a deck. So instead of printing a whole bunch, paying for it up front, putting it on Amazon, not knowing how much of it is gonna sell, it's just more environmental and more practical and more leaner, to have it available on a print-on-demand format. So thanks again, Jen, and I hope I'll be able to update you soon with some good news about this. Nives, I'm sorry, I can't say this correctly, Nives. You say how to interpret more negative cards like the mice, the whip, the fox, when asking questions like, what can I do to improve something? Okay, good question. That's really constructive, I think. So usually when you get negative cards, when you're asking about advice or what to do when personal development questions, it's basically the negative cards are going to ask you to stop doing something, to look at your negative patterns, and possibly with cards like the whip and scythe, it might be something like being more aggressive towards something, like not hesitating, not dwelling on it anymore, sort of just getting along, like moving forward more aggressively. This can come through the whip. And another thing, Nives, that I want to put out there is that in my card combination master, I define or I offer an advice that I associate with each of the cards. And that's also part of the correspondences, like what do you make of the cards in this context? What do you make of the cards when it comes to advice? And so I've actually spelled out each and every advice for each and every card. So you might like to have a look at the master. Maybe it's going to help you answer your self-improvement questions or improvement questions in general when it comes to negative and all the other cards. So I hope this helps. Okay, so here's Suleiman's first question, I think. He says, I would like to know what each card represents when it comes to the timing, the houses in Lenormand, months, weeks, days, years, etc. So Suleiman, the houses and timing are a bit different. If there is some kind of way that you overlap the two together, bring it up to me again and we'll respond to it. But the timing of the cards is another one of those correspondences. So for example, what does the fish mean when it comes to love? What does the fish mean when it comes to people? What does the fish mean when it comes to timing? These are what I call correspondences. And so with timing, which is very tricky, by the way, and it's not always accurate. Like timing is the hardest thing to predict. And I think I've said this before. I do have a correspondence for the timings in the master as well. So I'm not going to go through every single card now here, but we can use several things. You can look at the symbol of the card and get a feel for if it's slow or fast. For example, the tree, the mountain, the anchor, the tower, they're sort of stuck cards. They're heavier cards. They're rooted in the ground. So you would expect them to be a bit slower. What about something like the rider, the bird, probably the road, the scythe, the whip? They're faster cards, right? Because the action you associate with them is a bit more, much faster than something like the anchor or the mountain. So for starters, you can look at the symbol of the card and get a feel for its energy and get a sense of whether that's a fast or a slow card. And then you might have the cards that are in between. They're not too slow, they're not too fast, like the road, for example. And what you can do is you can sit down with your cards and sit down with yourself and come up with what you feel are the timing of the cards. And then you start practicing these meanings in your readings, and you'll find that in time they start to work. Because at the end of the day, cards are like affirmations. What you assign to them in meaning starts to manifest in your practice. So that's my suggestion. Another technique people use is the pips. So for example, these are aces. So for example, the garden is the eight of spades. And so the 8 can point to like people say, like 8 weeks, 8 days, 8 hours, 8 months. I don't really go for this technique. Anything that's a bit too formulaic, I tend to avoid because it doesn't work normally. But if it gives you a hint, and you have the meaning of the cards that, are supportive of what this 8 is telling you, then you might like to use this indication. Again, it's not really my approach. I prefer to go with the energy of the cards and from there sort of get a sense of, well, how soon, how fast. One more thing, because timing is so tricky, I prefer to embed the timing or the timeline in the question. So when I do on my private readings menu, if you've taken one, you might notice that I have a box when you fill in the form that says timeline. So we set the intention of the timeline as part of the question, and we read for that timeline. I find it's more practical. It is more, it's more realistic because timing is really tricky. Okay, so I hope this helps, Suleiman. Let's move on to another question. This is from Amal Awad. She says, I watched the video on shuffling the cards, but how do you decide if you deal or fan out the deck for the card selection? That is a good question, Amal, and honestly, I thought of doing another video about, fanning out the deck versus dealing out the cards. I think it's going to depend on your patience. So if you're going to do a grand tableau where you're going to lay out all 36 cards, I think fanning out the deck and then selecting each card in turn can be a bit tedious. I personally like to have messy piled, shuffled the cards, and then I just deal them out because it's faster and it's more energetic. It works better for the for me for the tableau. But it's up to you. Also, when I lay out the cards in an overlapping way, so like this, for example, if I were to lay out the cards on something like this, I like to deal them because it's easier to have them overlap when you deal the cards. So it depends on the layout. So for example, with the hourglass and the diamond, the medium diamond, I like to deal them out because I'm going to overlap the cards. But in a portrait, for example, I tend to fan out the deck and I pick each card. It's not too long and they don't overlap, so I prefer to fan out the deck. Bottom line, Amal, it's really up to you. It's up to what is more practical for you. The key is really to have a deck that is well shuffled and that is unbiased from the previous spread, so that the layout that you're doing now is clean and it has no energies or effects from the previous reading. I hope this makes sense. Let me know. Okay, Liz, she says, I've been confused by both the snake and the fox. My decks seem to suggest to me that the fox is more about being crafty like a fox. I guess I see more positive meanings for them. Hard for me to tell. The tower too is confusing sometimes. Yes, I agree, Liz. So I would agree with you if that's what you're saying, that the fox is a bit more positive than the snake. There is something really toxic about the snake that the fox doesn't have. Remember that the snake has venom. So as an animal, snakes have venom and foxes don't. Foxes can be pretty cute pets. I mean, I don't agree with having pets from the wild. Or actually pets, I fell out of that, but never mind. But foxes can be a bit more fun. Snakes are not fun in the way that foxes are. You know, snakes are they're sharper, they're meaner, even though the fox can be a trickster. So yes, I would agree that the fox is a bit more positive than the snake. But in my dictionary, at least, I'm still able to associate some positive things with either the fox or the snake. So the fox is great with families, with discipline. It's smart, it's clever, it knows what it needs to do. And the snake is also like that. And the snake is also very sharp, very alert, very aware, really knows what it wants, eyes on the prize type of character. So that's my thoughts on the snake and fox. And yes, the fox is about being crafty like a fox, just like you say here. And the tower too is confusing. Yeah, the tower doesn't say anything unless you decide what it says, sort of thing. And I've said that in a few other videos as well. The tower, at least as far as I'm concerned, and a few authors as well, it's about time, the long term, the past. And it's also associated with authority, government, administration, legal matters, that sense of authority. And it's associated with expertise, consultants, top management, and things like that. So the tower is about time on the one hand and expertise and government on the other hand. It's kind of a neutral card. So I hope this helps, Liz. Moving on to, again, Optimistic and Happy says, what do you mean by setting the intention before dealing the cards? Do you meditate or do a ritual before a reading? To be honest, Liz, sorry, that's not Liz. That's Optimistic and Happy. To be honest with you, I haven't felt the need to do rituals for a long time. I have to say that I have some parts of my life I have a ritualistic approach to them. In divination, I somehow don't. I'm very minimalistic and very down to earth with my cards, if that makes sense, and it doesn't, without meaning to say anything about anyone or imply anything about anyone's practices or habits. I totally understand why it's good to do a ritual. For me, setting the intention just means really understanding what I'm after when I'm asking a question. And sometimes we ask questions, but we're not really attuned to the essence of the question. Do you know what I mean? So for me, setting the intention is really becoming clear of what am I really after when I'm doing this reading? What do I really want to know? And so I set the intention and I say, this is what I want to know. This is my intention for this reading. This is what I want to know. Or this is what I want to get out of it. Sometimes it's not knowledge, it's not information. It's just a sense of resonance that I'm looking for. So that's what I mean by intention. So do I meditate? Do I do rituals? Like I said, I do these in other parts of my life for other purposes. I do affirmations, for example. I'm very, very hot on affirmations. And so there is a ritualistic kind of thing that can happen with affirmations, I guess you can say. And do I meditate? Yeah, sometimes I meditate. Yeah, I've been out of the habit for a long time. I was thinking of bringing it back into my life. I'm a dedicated yoga practitioner, and I do other things in life like that. But specifically for a reading, do I meditate? Not so much. No, I don't like sit down and I meditate. It's not my personal approach. But here's what I want to say. It doesn't matter if it's not my personal approach. It matters if this is something that you want to do, that you feel will help you do or give a better reading, so definitely do the practices, do the meditations and the rituals that you feel empower your reading and make you feel good, and put you in the right mindset for the reading. And on this note, I want to say that, doing readings doesn't have to be a big deal. I personally, I read almost, I read for anything. For example, I want to give you a fun example. When I was back in Toronto, I would use public transit. So I would wait for the bus. And I didn't always have data on my phone to check the bus, if the bus was coming on the GPS. So I would actually turn up a card. And I would say, so the bus is often late in Toronto. I mean, the transit has issues in Toronto. So I would wait, I would be there and I would wait and I would ask myself, well, do I wait longer or do I just walk? So I would flip a card and say, well, let's just go walk. And I would do it, so I can use cards for things that, I cannot have any judgment about. I would flip a card, so for me, reading can be very casual. But then there are other times where I'm like, no, this is a big deal. I really want to sit down over this and really read. So I might be a bit more ritualistic, as you put it. So I would clean my space. I would clean out my cards, take out my cards, shuffle them well, and just sit around and think about, what do I really want to know? So again, setting the intention for this reading. So I hope this helps, and let me know what you do. Be fun to know. Okay, moving on to more questions. Okay, Meti Jensen, I'm sorry, I don't think I said this correctly, and it says, I often have a hard time interpreting the moon card, especially if it shows up as the middle card in a box spread, which is the portrait, and it is not a work reading. Okay, so sometimes the moon is associated with work. I think I've come across that, yeah. I would love your thoughts on the moon card in general readings and in daily readings as well. And then I think there's more to your question, Mete. I sometimes find daily readings okay, so let's take both in turn. So the second part of the question is daily readings. So the moon card, the moon card is can be a bit general, like it's not really saying anything specific. The moon is great for anything that has to do with invitations, honors, recognition, being appreciated. The moon works really well with that. So whether it's in the center of a portrait or in a daily reading, it can mean that you get an invitation to do something, to go somewhere, or to be part of something. It can also mean that you get an appreciation or a compliment, possibly, that sense of recognition and appreciation for something you've done. If you're reading about anything, the moon is usually positive, and so it would mean that you achieve the goal, or if you're after something, you get it. If you're hoping, it can be a wish fulfillment card. That's what I'm getting at. It's a bit slower in energy, and it also asks you to be gentle. So the moon is archetypally the passive, the feminine passive, and so the idea is to attract more than to aggressively pursue, which is the more masculine archetypal energy. And it's generally positive. It softens things up. It's kind. It's also associated with beauty and creativity, again through the feminine here. So maybe it's about you expressing, feeling good about yourself and all of these nice things. So I hope this sort of helps. But again, Mete, if this is not so helpful, you might want to check out the Card Combination Master or other dictionaries, and then you might also want to focus on the specific combinations that the moon is with, and then get an overall energy for what the reading is telling you. And then Meti goes on to say, I sometimes find daily readings confusing, as well as taking the smallest possible meaning of the card. Could you maybe go through a few cards and give some examples? I would love to get better. So I definitely understand what you're saying, Mete, and I've brought this point up several times in the sense that a daily reading can actually be tricky with Lenormand because there are just a few cards normally in a daily reading, and the cards can can almost tell you about anything. So you really need context to guide how to interpret the cards. And when you ask a specific question, the cards are bound to that context, and so it's easier to interpret them for that context. But if it's an open-ended reading, like a daily reading, or just maybe a longer, like a week or a month, it can be tricky how to interpret the cards because it can be anything. So I'm not so sure what you say as well as with taking the smallest possible meaning of the card. Maybe you are referring to just the most basic meaning of the card. So I'm not sure how you do a daily reading, but I have to say, Mette, if you're doing just a one card reading for a daily reading, that's going to be limiting. You just do a one card reading when you're really just starting out. When you're just at square one and you're just starting out with the cards, you might do one card just to start seeing the cards and to learn what they're about. But if you've been practicing just a little bit longer and you're doing daily readings, then I'm going to suggest you do 3 cards, at least 3 cards. You can do 5, and Titania even does 7 as just a daily reading, like a line of 7. So with 3 cards, let's say you get these 3 cards, yeah? I just pulled those out of the deck. These are the 3 cards you get. So you see the letter in the middle, you could get news, but it's really interesting that you have the anchor and the bird, because it can mean that you need to sit down today and do email, send out letters, follow up on documents, follow up on administration, just get in touch, reach out, maybe send out your resume if you're looking for work. So it's a pretty practical interpretation of these cards, and with the anchor really telling you to not delay and to sit down and really do it. The letter and anchor can also mean attachments, like attaching documents, sending out documents and all of that, making calls and so on. So I would say, Mette, if you want to make it easier to do a daily reading, I would suggest that you make your line a little bit longer. That way you have more specific combinations that will help you interpret the cards. You're saying a few examples. Here's one. Let's pick the next 3 out of my deck. Oh, that's nice. This is really nice for money. The fish is about money. The star is good for income. And the book, it can mean here that you're looking at accounting, bookkeeping. That's how I read the fish and book. And at first, Mette, what you're going to do is you're going to spend some time with these card combination dictionaries, or you're going to come up with your own meanings, and then you're going to start building your vocabulary from there. And then you'll be able to be more specific in your interpretations. So yes, daily readings are tricky because they're open-ended and you need a few more cards. Okay, moving on. Okay, so this is more like a divination question. I'm going to skip over this one and go to, I had a couple of questions by email. So these are from Veronica. Veronica says, she has a few. She says, could you in a way explain the difference between the moon and star? They feel so similar. And as a beginner, I'm also confused about the tree. Okay, so let's talk about the moon and star, and we just talked about it because Mette was asking about the moon and star, so that it's really good it comes up now. So yes, the moon and star are both celestial cards that have a lot of sense of well-being that is associated with them. I would say the star is more powerful than the moon in terms of its positive energy. The star is an all-around wish fulfillment card. It has everything to do with wishes coming true and hopes materializing. The moon is not as strong in its wish fulfilling aspect. It's slower, it's gentler. And the difference also is that the star is not really associated with honors and invitations. It has to do with success and maybe even, shining like a star, so having that sense of fame. But it doesn't have the invitation and proposal indication that is better associated with the moon. I would also say that the moon can be prone to negative influences, whereas the star overcomes them. So the star and whip, for example, can point to healing. Some authors don't see it this way. Some authors will allow for negative influence to affect the star. But I think, if anything, negative influences affect the moon more strongly than they would affect the star. Does this make sense? So the moon and whip can point to disappointments and some kind of inner chaos. So it's a bit like the tarot cards here, where the tarot moon. And I've talked about that in the tarot, in my first tarot versus Lenormand video recently, where I suggested that the moon and clouds, or the moon and mouse, and other negative cards might bring up the the more negative associations that we make with the tarot moon. Not so much so with the star. The star is all around positivity and wish fulfillment, and it's a lot less prone to negativity than the moon. So I hope this makes sense, Veronica. And she also has confusion about the tree. She says, I'm very confused about it. She says, some people say that the tree, according to the original Lenormand, is always about bad health when near. And others say it's just health in general, and that you need to look at surrounding cards and questions. So near and far are a tableau technique. We'll leave that for another day. But in a nutshell, when a card is near the significator, it affects it more strongly than when it's far. And so Veronica here is saying that when the tree is near the significator in a tableau, that's what she's implying, then it's about bad health. And some say, well, it depends what's around the tree. So in general, I personally think the tree is a very positive card. I really have a hard time reading the tree as negative. Bad health for me would be better associated with the coffin, feeling ill, having to rest, the idea of not being able to do much. So I associate bad health with the coffin. I don't see why you would want to associate bad health with the tree, even if it's the original way of reading the cards. I just don't resonate with it this way. If you do, Veronica, that is totally fine. You can interpret the tree in the way that you like. But I feel that we have the coffin, we have the whip, we have the mouse. It's enough negative cards. If you are focused on health, focus on health and interpret the cards accordingly. But if you're reading a tableau and you're looking for the different areas of your life, and you might want to pick out the coffin for health. You can also pick out the lily. The lily is another card that could be associated with health. Or you can pick the tree. In this sense, though, the tree would be neutral, right? Because it is it's your theme card, right? So you're looking at the tree, and you would normally read the portrait around the tree, and just to get a sense check, well, how's my health going? So that's how you would do it in a tableau. But in general, I personally feel, Veronica, that the tree is the opposite of good health. It's the opposite of bad health, sorry. It is good health. It is healing. It is overcoming. A lot of traditions see trees as bearers of wisdom and knowledge. And, it's hard to see the tree as negative. I don't see why, personally. So I hope this sort of answers your question. But again, feel free to define your dictionary in the way that you want. And just in general, don't be confused by these different interpretations. It's true that Lenormand is a little bit all over the place. We don't really have one unified body of knowledge, which is why I created the master course, just to bring everything under one umbrella in a coherent way, so that we can learn it and enjoy it. But just pick these different techniques, practice them, experience them, experiment with them, and see which ones you like. If you feel it works, if you feel it doesn't work, feel free to define your practice. It is your practice, so feel free to define it. I would definitely encourage you to take more freedom with your practice. So don't feel confused. See how you resonate with the cards and practice from there. And Veronica, you do have more questions. Oh, this is long. Okay. She says, I try to draw 3 cards each morning, and I ask the cards to show me something I will experience today, or maybe just to show me the day. Tuesday, I got the crossroads, the stork, and the man, and I thought, maybe I will talk about some changes at work with my boss. But nothing showed up that suited those cards that day. At least I couldn't find it. This morning, I drew garden, stork, and fish, and again, I couldn't find anything that matched those cards until later, when I got home from work and made a phone call to a printing office where I asked about printing some tarot cards and how much it would cost. So he told me a lot more expensive. Oh, that's interesting, than I thought. Okay. He also gave me some other options. Okay, so today's cards fit really well. But I also started to think about yesterday cards. They fit really well today as well. Yes, and I was going to get to that. And so, can cards jump or almost be delayed 1 or 2 days? How should I think? How should I think about? Exactly. So, Veronica, you answered your all questions. So this maybe longer explanation to come to the and examples to come to the question of, well, you know, sometimes cards don't seem to really answer at that day. They seem to answer the next one. Bingo, they do. It does move around. And that's why timing and timelines are a little bit trickier. So it's important to be a bit more flexible with the cards. Maybe today not much happened. You know, maybe it's happening tomorrow. You might like to do a weekly spread. Try a line of 7 or a portrait for a weekly spread. Maybe it will help you be more flexible about this, but it's good to practice daily spread. Daily spreads, they're fun, and you know, they help build your vocab. But yes, Veronica, in a nutshell, the timing can sort of jump around from one day to the next. Okay, I do have a few more questions that came up on the tableau style video. And I think I'm going to go back and put a note for the folks who asked them there. But I thought I would bring them up on this video because they are relevant, and the tableau always is of interest to many of us. So Alpha Andromeda asks, firstly, in what order do you read the cards in a grand tableau? As I normally do, from left to right, normally. She says, if I have the coffin in the house of the stork, okay, is it the house which modifies the pulled card or vice versa? Okay, so Alpha Andromeda is talking about a technique that is used with the tableau called the houses techniques. The houses, we should maybe do a video about this at some point. So the houses are the cards laid out in the tableau format you're going to draw in the order of their number. So the number is not the pip. Where am I? The number, this is not zooming in. The number is not the pip. It is not the playing card. It is the other number. So this is garden number 20. So what you do is you lay out the cards, or you imagine them in the order that they come in the deck, their number. And what you do is your tableau is what you draw on top of them. So some people have they have this sheet that they use, and they lay out the cards on top of the houses. I use 2 decks. So I will put one deck as a house, and then I'll draw my tableau on top of it with another deck. And then some people might just, I've done that as well because I'm a minimalist. You just put the tableau in front of you as like a picture in front of you, and you know what house you're drawing the cards over. So anyway, long story short, the houses spread is about having one card as the house and your tableau card as the card that fits on top of it. So the big question is, well, how does a card interact with the house it lands on? And so some people try to be really specific about, well, what influences what, and my advice is just to take it as a combination, just like a straight up regular combination, because it doesn't really, it might be helpful with some cards to say this card modifies this one and not the other way around, but it is not often the case. Like, I really want people to give me examples in order to tell me that it applies across the board. But Alpha Andromeda gives an example. She says, I have the coffin in the house of the stork. So the house is the stork, okay? And then the coffin comes in. So what does that mean? It can mean that it's premature to act, so wait a little bit before taking action, but it can also mean that you take action. And actually, these 2 interpretations would apply regardless of which card was the house and which card landed on top of it, I feel. And that's why I think that it doesn't really matter which card modifies the other. if it's the house that modifies the card, or if it's the card that modifies the house, it's the same because it is a combination. You are looking at the interaction of the two cards. So unless you have more examples, Alpha Andromeda, I don't feel that it's I don't feel that to say this really adds value. You do continue, you say, in this case, I would read Coffin Stork, which is the end of something, which either was inevitable or the end of something which leads to a profound change. Yeah, I mean, this comes down to how you interpret the coffin and stork together. I read the stork and coffin as meaning that something that was on hold now picks up. Or would I read it as stork and coffin, which could be read as a change or a big move, which dies and doesn't happen. So again, just like I said, it can be either one. It just depends on how you read the combination, and if you think the order of the cards in general affects the combination. So you could look, for example, if you are in a situation like this and you're not sure which interpretation figures. Although I honestly feel, Alpha Andromeda, that both of your interpretations are almost the same. To say that the end of something which was inevitable is also a big change. They're all, the change is part of something that ends. They're always together. So again, I feel that's one of those combinations where the order doesn't really matter. So that would be my thought. I don't think there is this idea that one card modifies the other, in like this grammar kind of way that a lot of people talk about with Lenormand. Sometimes it's valid, but not all the time. And so I feel that it doesn't matter. And I feel that reading the card on top of the houses is just reading a combination, a straight up combination. It's also a bit like giving you more clues about the card. So for example, the stork lands on the house. The stork is about changes. Changes about what? Well, about the house, about, things at home. Maybe you're moving, maybe you're renovating, you're making other changes in the home. It can work in this way. You might also get clues about what the change is about, obviously from the lines and the rows and columns, the big story lines, but also maybe from the knights, like we said earlier in the video, for I think it was Suleiman's question. So that's my suggestion. Let me know if this is satisfactory, Alpha. These are technical questions, and I'm happy to take them up further because a lot of you out there are really at that point, and I think it would be great to continue the conversation. So let me know how you like my thoughts. Last question, Suki Samo asks, also in the tableau video, are the cards ordered in a deck by its creator? I've seen interpretations where the reading picked out cards sitting in the space of another card. For example, I'm not sure what you mean, Suki, but let's continue. For example, the woman card is in place of the key card. So I guess my question is there an original space designed for each card, and when doing a grand tableau, using that ordinal layout as an interpretation to how the cards fall in the layout now currently being read? So Suki is talking about the houses, which is what we just talked about with Alpha. Unless I misinterpret this, Suki, I think you are referring to the houses. So like I said, you imagine the houses as the cards laid out in their order, and your tableau is randomly drawn on top of these, and what you read is the interaction of your tableau cards with the house that they're on. Now, does this have to do with, are the cards ordered in a deck by its creator? No. The order of the cards is the classical Lenormand order, which is reflected by the number that is associated with each card, and the number is not the pip. So the pip card or the playing card in set is not the number. We have a number and a playing card, and the order is based on the number. And based on that order, we lay out the cards as the houses in the tableau shape that you want, and then you randomly draw your tableau on top of that. Does this make sense, Suki, or did I confuse everyone with the houses? Maybe we should do a houses spread sometime to illustrate. I'm going to take note of that, folks. So I'm going to wrap up the video here. It was probably another half hour. I hope it was helpful and informative. As always, keep the questions coming. Let's build this community and let's forward this amazing Lenormand practice. So thanks so much for tuning in, folks, and I'm looking forward to our next reading together. Take good care. Bye.